so I don't forget. Okay, so welcome to the first session of the Research Toolkit, which is all about finding and using information. And I'm going to share my screen. Where are we? Here. Let's see if I can share this. My screen is playing up on me as usual. Okay. So I'm just going into full screen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Diarmuid. Okay. So this is the plan for today. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the scholarly publications and academic databases landscape. We're going to do an overview of available search databases, not just within UCD Library, but also beyond. We'll do a bit of deep searching the literature, so tips on how to construct a good search. And we'll use one particular database just to show you as an example. And then a quick intro into managing your search results and just resources for citing and referencing. If there is time, we might be able to do a Q&A, but this session is 45 minutes, so we'll see if we have time. But first, I wanted to find out what search tools, I'll just decline that for the minute, you use for your own research. So I want you to go to this website, menti.com, and enter this code, 6908-2800. And Diarmuid, if you could put the code into the chat and the link to the website, that would be fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and go myself to menti.com so we can see what things you are actually using for your searches. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see where we are. And I'm going to share my screen as soon as this thing loads up. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of very familiar things. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Can you see that? So it's very clear that a lot of you are using Google Scholar. Some of you are using PubMed and the Cochrane Library and OneSearch and JSTOR and academic journals and many other things. Google Scholar is getting very big there. So let me see how many of us there are. 96 participants. So I'm going to give you an extra minute to fill in your tools. For those of you who are coming in just now, I am asking you to tell me the search databases or search tools that you use in your own research. And of course, Google Scholar is coming out, big thing now. And I was going to say that while we do this presentation, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to gather them up at the end and address them. Okay, so we now have 59 responses. If any of you want to put more of your search tools, you can. But for the moment, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll show you the final presentation with the final results at the very end, okay? And now let me share back my presentation. Okay. So, but before we start looking at databases and search strategies and basically techniques, I want you to get your head around the publications landscape. Some of you are probably very familiar with it, and others may not be so familiar. So if you can, Diarmuid, can you put in the link to this article? Web of Science and Scopus are not global databases of knowledge. As you know, Web of Science and Scopus are very much the kind of standard that's used for looking at citations and research impact and that kind of thing for researchers across the world. So I want you to look at the abstract of this article. So you can see that maybe they're not so global and so representative of all the research that's happening in the world. Please put in the chat if you can actually get into the article or at least see the abstract. And if you're having difficulties, also put it in, please. And in the meantime, while you try to get in there, I'm going to give you a quote from the article, or rather two quotes. So in one of the quotes, Scopus claims that they have about 700 journals listed from Latin America, which is 168% more than Web of Science. However, Cielo, which is a portal for research repositories from universities and other public institutions across Latin America, has more than 1,700 journals at present, and Red Alic, which supports social sciences journals in Latin America, has more than 550. So out of over 2,200 journals, Scopus only has 700. And of the 23,000 currently published scholarly journals in the Scopus database, only 5,000 of these are published in languages other than English. I want to give you a second to think about that. So when you're doing your searches in library databases or in Google Scholar or in whatever database you use, and you're filtering by English language, you're basically shutting out 3/4 of the research that goes on in the world. And this is at a time when it hasn't been easier to use an online translator to get a very good approximation of what an article is about. Because Google Translation is actually getting really close to pretty decent translations of texts. So this is something that, this is research from 2018. It's actually gotten worse in the last few years. But this is the world scaled according to the number of papers published in Web of Science by researchers living in that country. So as you can see, North America, Europe, China, India are quite well represented, and the rest of the world are literally dwarfed, as if there was no research happening in those countries. But when you go to the research organizations in those countries and the research repositories, the open access research repositories in those countries, you realize there's a lot more happening there than Web of Science or Scopus or any of those are letting you know. The other thing I wanted to point out to you is the library subscribes to the likes of Scopus and Web of Science and EBSCO and JSTOR and ProQuest and many of those others. And people tend to be selective about which one they use because they think that all articles are included everywhere. This is a study that was done in 2021 or published in 2021 on employee retention and staff turnover. And they did a comparison of which articles were available in Web of Science, Scopus, and EBSCO. And of a total of over 3,000 articles, only 130 of them were actually available in all three. So where you search will actually shape your conclusions and what you have access to. Okay. So let's have a look at some of the available databases and search tools. Your first port of call, if you want to know what databases and search tools are available for your specific discipline, is our subject guides. And at the top there in the presentation, there is a link to the portal for subject guides. And there, if you click on any of your subjects, you'll go to a library guide, which will list what are the relevant databases for your area. But most of those will be databases that we subscribe to and that we offer as the library in UCD. There will very rarely be any links to other open access databases, but those are still key tools for you as researchers. And for that reason, I wanted to give you some links to some databases that are publicly available on open access, including Google Scholar, of course. So if you click on any of these, you will go directly to this database. Scopus, Web of Science, and Science Direct are some of the biggest multidisciplinary databases that the library subscribes to. And the subscription fees are massive. So if you have access to these while you're here, take advantage of them because they're costing a lot. But when you finish your PhD or your postdoc or whatever it is, or you move on to a different organization, or you're working for an NGO and you don't have a lot of resources to subscribe to expensive databases, there are other resources that you can use. And these are things like Core, PubMed, Dimensions, and Lens. Google Scholar is a separate thing, and I'll talk about it in a minute. So Core, PubMed, Dimensions, and Lens. Core is a UK database that harvests data from open access research repositories across the world, and it makes them available. So it's really good for finding a lot of material. It does have one drawback though, which is it doesn't easily allow you to export your search results so that you can import them into Citation Software. So that's a massive drawback. PubMed is again a publicly available database, the National Library of Medicine in the US, and they're open access papers, and you can export your results and import them into EndNote or Zotero or Mendeley or whatever it is that you're using as citation software. Dimensions and Lens are two of the newest, and they are software platforms that use linked data and artificial intelligence to harvest material from core and other sources of scholarly publications. And you can access them as free databases just to search the publications included in the databases, but they also offer really specialized data services that require a subscription fee. And I'll show one of them to you later. So, a few tips about search tools. The first one and most important is that if you want to be able to save your searches or register for search alerts or export your results to your citation software of choice, you need to register with each individual database. And then the other one is that before you carry out a search, check the database's search tips. Each of them uses their own truncation symbols, and while they will all use Boolean operators such as or and or not, each of them may apply them slightly differently in the way, well, I'll explain that a little bit later. We'll see below for more on this. So I'm going to stop share a minute, give you time to breathe and put questions in the chat if you have any. And yes, Cornelia, even if you don't filter, it hardly shows non-English publications. Totally agree. Thoughts, comments, anything you care to think about? In the next 1 minute or so. And I think what I'm going to do is unpin my colleagues so you can see each other too. The other thing I was going to say is, I realize it's very difficult for some of you to turn your camera on, so I'm absolutely fine if you can't. But I may ask you at the end to turn your camera on if you can, briefly, just to say hello, okay? So if anyone has comments on the chat about anything that has been covered so far. Okay, so the link is within the presentation, and I'm going to give you the presentation link. I think I have it. Again. So that's where you can open the presentation and download it in any format that you want. Yes, the library subscribes to commercial databases. They are all listed in the library guides I have mentioned. And also Scopus, Web of Science, and Science Direct are absolutely very much commercial databases. And if you have databases that we don't subscribe to, you can get in touch with your college liaison librarian, and I'll refer to those at the end of the presentation. The recording will be shared with all of the participants, yes. Fiona, that's probably beyond my ability to answer at the moment. Some of these are actually not available to academic libraries, and others are so prohibitively expensive for an academic library that we would never be able to afford them. Okay, right. So let's continue sharing. And let's continue with the presentation. Okay. Do you all know how to link Google Scholar to UCD Library? To do that, you need to go to scholar.google.com. Go to the menu on the left-hand side and click on Settings, and then click on Library Links. And maybe I'll just escape this for a minute and actually show you how to do that. So scholar.google.com, and I'm going to share my screen for a minute. So I'm on Google Scholar. I'm actually logged in because I am on my UCD email. I click on this menu link. I go to Settings. I go to Library Links, and I make sure that University College Dublin, at least, or any other library that you're interested in, is checked in my list. And then I click on Save. And then I'm going to show you a brief preview of a search that I'm going to do later. So that's going to be our search for later. If I do economic effects pandemics and click on Google Scholar, because I have linked UCD Library with Google Scholar, I have all of these links that say that this article is available via one search at UCD Library, and so is this, and so are some of the other ones. So for instance, this one, which is from Springer, which is a commercial publisher, and if we didn't subscribe to it, it wouldn't be available to you. You can just click on directly and it'll take you directly to the article. Okay. Oh, for some reason the page is not available. Sorry. In theory, that should work. But it hasn't. Let me see if one of the other ones has does help, does work. So for instance, this one at the top. Let's see if that one works. Oh, I don't know what's happening with my configurations for library access to UCD material. I may have to get in touch with our library IT people. Okay, I'm going to add my presentation share again. And go back to full screen. But in theory, if you link Google Scholar with UCD, you can actually access the material. The other thing I wanted to say to you very quickly is that if you are logged in, you can save an article that you like to your library by just clicking on the stars underneath the titles. You can also see who has cited this article and access those articles, or at least see the record for them. And you can also filter by time, by year. So Google Scholar allows you to manage your results in many different ways, as do most of the other databases that I'm going to show you in a minute. Okay. But you have to be careful, because if you do a search on Google Scholar when you are logged into your Google account at UCD, for instance, Google will give you the results as a personalized search, which means that the results are not based on the relevance of the item, but also based on which websites you have visited in your previous search results. So search results are not ranked in the same way for every user. Each of you here can do a search for exactly the same words, but if you're logged into your Google account, the search results that you get will be different from your neighbors. So to counter that, you can delete your browser search history. You can log out of your Google account. You can go to my activity page, and that's linked in the presentation, and remove all Google services. And also, if you want some more information on Google Scholar searches, you can check a video tutorial I did last year, which takes 5 minutes to listen to, but it'll give you a lot more tips on how to use Google Scholar effectively. So let me have a look. Oh, somebody's saying Google Scholar link to UCD Library does indeed work. Excellent. I'm glad you learned that today. Okay, so more things. If it lets me go on. Okay, so now let's get to the nuts and bolts of how you create a good search strategy. The first thing is, think about your research and start with a very broad scoping search, even just using the library's one search, to get the feel of the topic. If in this very broad search you identify a key article that you think is really relevant to what you're looking for, then make the most of it. Open the article, look at the bibliography, see if you can do a cited reference search. Depending on which database you're using, you might be able to click on the citations and then see the titles of those articles or even access them. Or you can look for the specific title of the article in a database of your choice, and then see what keywords the database describes, the database uses to describe this article. And then take those keywords, put them in your search, and run the search again to see if new results come up. My other really important tip is keep a research diary, and I mean a search diary. Something that may look as simple as this. This is just a simple word table. You have the database name, the date of the search, the exact search keywords that you used, the numbers of results you got, and then any comments about it. And the comments could be things like, well, the results weren't very relevant, or there are too many articles that I can't access, or just tell yourself something about how many of the articles you have already downloaded, or stuff like that. This avoids you going down rabbit holes and wasting time, because you can go back to your research diary template and go, oh, this is where I was and this is what I got. So now I'm going to go on to the next database, or I'm going to amend my search because this search didn't really give me the results that I needed. But at least it's all documented. And before doing anything, think about your search, because your search results will only be as good as the search strategy you use. And I don't mean rocket science. I mean just common sense. So don't just use one word. Use synonyms and opposites. If your research is on something to do with equality or justice, there's probably somewhere in there keywords to do with inequality and discrimination. Think about alternative spellings and abbreviations. Think about singulars and plurals. And then also think about using truncated searches where you use the root of the word and an asterisk or some other symbol that the database uses to find all possible versions of that word. So if you put in change and asterisk, that will give you change, changes, changing, changed, changeable, etc. In other words, help the database do its job, because most library databases are not Google Scholar. When I mentioned Boolean operators, this is what I meant. These are the main three Boolean operators: and, or not. So if you do a search for autism and child, it will only give you results that have both terms. So it's a narrow search. If you do a search for autism or autistic disorder, it'll give you the search results that have either one or the other term. So that broadens the search. And if you do a search that says autism, not Asperger syndrome, that will exclude any papers that have the word Asperger syndrome. And you have to be cautious with that, because sometimes if it's an article both about autism and Asperger syndrome, it will be excluded from your search results because it has Asperger syndrome. That's how Boolean operators work. Okay. I'm going to come out of this stop share for the minute and ask if you have any questions. I'm seeing your comments. Yes, search diaries are brilliant. They really help, because sometimes you may be doing research on something and then you get interrupted, and 2 days later you go back and you've no idea where you were. But if you keep a search diary and just record the searches that you do as you do them, that really helps. Okay, 1 more minute. Yes, the presentation slides are available and I have pasted them on the chat, and I'll do that again right now. There they are. Okay. I'm going to give you a few more seconds just in case you have questions about what I have been talking about. But if you don't, then we need to get cracking because we only have 10 more minutes. Okay, so this is an example. If I had more time, I would ask you to find the alternative terms, but I'm going to cheat this time and just give them to you. So if we wanted to do a search for the economic impact of pandemics, this is what we would do. You would identify the key concepts, economic impact and pandemic, and try and find alternative terms. If you were doing an ordinary, say, literature review or just a basic search for a research topic, you may not need a lot of alternative terms. But if you're doing a systematic review, then you have to find as many alternative terms as apply. Let's have a look here. I will send the presentation to all, so you will receive an email after today with all of this information. So here are some really rough alternative terms that I came up with in 2 seconds. See the way I'm using the root of the word and an asterisk. So that will give me as many endings to the word as possible. This is what the search would look like. So you would have econ and impact or effect or consequence and pandemic or epidemic or outbreak or contagion or whatever it is. You can take this search and use it in almost any database that you're familiar with or that's relevant to the topic. I am going to show you how you do this search in Dimensions. So I'm going to come out of this for a second, go to Dimensions and share this again. So as I said, Dimensions is actually a database that uses linked data and artificial intelligence to pull together publication data information from hundreds of repositories. Tierman, would you be able to put in the link to Dimensions there, please, just in case anyone is interested in searching for this? And I'm going to just put in the search strategy that I showed you earlier. Okay, and then go back to my share. Are you still seeing the Dimensions web page in my shared screen? Yes or no?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Okay.
Yes.
So Dimensions just has a very simple search. I am at the moment logged into Dimensions because I registered with them earlier in the year. So I can just click on their search and see the way it's asking me whether I wanted to search in the full data, in the title and abstract, or in the DOI, which is the web address for the particular article. I wanted to look in title and abstract, and I'm going to put in the search I did earlier. So grouping each of the blocks of concepts with brackets and then adding and. And then I just press return. And I get a variety of data that is quite astounding. First of all, Dimensions is telling me that wildcards are not supported by the database. So this goes back to what I said earlier. Before you do your search, check their instructions for searching. And Diarmuid, if you can put in the link into the chat for the support section of Dimensions where it talks about how to search the database, that would be great. That's also included in the presentation. The other thing is that you can filter by publication year. You can filter by researcher. You can look at the numbers of publications per year. You can also go into specific research categories. At the moment, it's only showing me publications. If you wanted access to datasets or grants or patents or clinical trials, see the way it says these content types are available with an organizational subscription. We don't have an organizational subscription because they're very expensive. But you can still access their publications data for free. And you can then select the ones that you're interested in, or just select all of them. And then click on Save and Export. You can save this search as a favorite. And if I click on that, I could name this search. So I could call it something like economic impact of pandemics. And I could tell it to send me email updates when new results related to this search appear in their database. So I could click that and then say save. I'm not going to do that at the moment. I could also export the results. And I would export them for a reference manager such as EndNote or Zotero, but you can also export the full record, and that will send you a spreadsheet with all of the information that they have. And it might take a little bit of time to generate, but you'll get an email saying when it has been generated. And then click on export. I'm not going to do that at the moment, but it's a really amazing data set that you have access to for free, no matter whether you are a UCD member or not. Okay, and I'm going to add my new search and go back to the presentation. We looked at managing our search results. Let me just show you. So most databases will allow you to save your searches. Most citation managers accept files in the RIS format. And if you want information about UCD's supported citation software, the one that IT services give support and that we support, EndNote, we have our EndNote library guide. For those of you who are very familiar with citation and referencing, this is probably not necessary, but I just wanted to give you a link to our academic integrity guide, which has examples of how to cite and reference in some of the major citation styles available, like Harvard, like APA, like Chicago, like Vancouver, etc. And if you need further help, you can contact your college liaison librarian, which is available. The list is available at that link. You can also use the library's LibChat tool or ask our staff at the library's information desks or contact any of our team. And now finally, I'm going to ask you to please give me feedback, give us as the team feedback on what you thought about this initial opening session of the Researcher Toolkit. So I'm going to send you the link there. And please let me know if you have difficulty accessing it. But it's really important for us to get a sense of how much you got out of this session. And now I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.